Sean Wilkins, I think, is one that can
Yeah.
really
Amen.
push the envelope for us. He's a good man, and I'm looking forward to doing that. So I really appreciate the opportunity to address everybody there today. I am Patrick Colbeck. I'm running for governor, and this is an important election that's coming up. And you know, usually our gubernatorial cycles here in the state of Michigan are 8 years Democrat, 8-year Republican, 8-year Democrat, 8-year Republican. And we're kind of teeing things up for that same sort of pattern this election cycle. And there's one way to bust that cycle. Right now, we've got about 54% of our electorate undecided on the gubernatorial race in the GOP side of the fence. Our the candidate with the highest percentage right now is sitting at 23%, that's the AG. We got the lieutenant governor at 13%. Both of them have pretty much ubiquitous name recognition across the state. So you can't say it's an issue of name recognition when it comes to low poll numbers. What it tells you is that people are seeing what's on the shelf and they're not buying it. And if we are going to get across the finish line in the general election, we need to do something different. Reagan put it this way: we need to start painting in bold colors. Hey, by the way, this rocket launched. So we need to go off and pursue bold colors, not pale pastels. And what would you single out as the singular achievement of our Republican Party that was kind of reminiscent of bold colors over the last 7 years?
Right to work.
Right to work. You sure it wasn't senior pension tax or Medicaid expansion or gas tax increase? I just want to make sure, because that's what we put all of our fundraising out on. Wasn't it those policies? Not right to work. No, it was right to work. And we talk about the economic boom that we've had coming out of Michigan. It's all, I can trace it all to, you can look at the hockey curve on the employment figures. It's all coming back to the passage of right to work. It's pretty clear. Well, I was the one who led, and Mike can attest to this, I was the one who led the effort in Michigan, in the Michigan Senate, to pass right to work. And it wasn't easy coming from the county that I come from, right? Home of the UAW, the birthplace of the UAW. But it was actually in response to a lot of the requests of UAW members and other union members saying, I want my First Amendment freedom of assembly back. They were being represented by people that were telling them talk to the hand, and they felt like they should have a little bit of a choice in whether or not they represented them well or not. And I often said during the whole fight for right to work, and I remember Barbara, it's like it was yesterday, when we were out at the Troy Community Center, and we had a discussion on right to work. And I still remember her in mother hen mode, because I went out to talk to all the union members outside, and she thought I'd never come back in. And
That was scary. They were.
yeah, God gave us a spirit of, not one of timidity, but one of power, love, and self-control. And we were just sharing the truth with these guys. And I can tell you, I've had a lot of discussions during that debate with a lot of folks that have been frankly duped. And that's our challenge as Republicans, is that we're ceding so much territory on so many different issues because we are not painting in bold colors. We are painting in pale pastel. So we allow the media to go off and define who we are as Republicans. We allow them to define what the issues are, and we are not being assertive at all. I think it's about time to be assertive on things and start swinging for the fences and dreaming big. That's what I've done my whole life. I've had over 2 decades serving in the private sector on some of the most challenging projects you're ever going to be wanted involved in. So Barbara alluded to the fact that I like this rocket science stuff. Well, I'm an aerospace engineer, graduated from the University of Michigan, bachelor's and master's degree. Went on to study at the International Space University in life sciences. One of my instructors was actually Buzz Aldrin. Went on to work for Boeing afterwards on the International Space Station. I was responsible for the life support system and also the airlock module. I used to teach at Space Camp as well. That was kind of my fun job. And we had a lot of, people said you couldn't go off and live in space. We were going off and proving them wrong. So people tend to say a lot of things that are impossible that really are not impossible. It just takes force of will and takes leadership. The next thing, you know, I went on to work for the Department of Defense. And I worked for for a joint program office out in Florida at the time, and I was direct report to Major Chuck Peabody, who's the best dang leader I ever worked for, Marine Corps Major. Still keep in contact with him. He gets a big kick out of the fact that I'm running for governor, ran for state senate, and even though he's in Florida, he's still following me up there. and it gave me an appreciation for the service that our military provide. These guys were not on the front lines at the time. We were developing a training system. It was a virtual reality training system for the military. But they were working like the dickens because they knew that the system that we put in had to be realistic, it had to be effective at training because lives were on the line. And I got total appreciation for that. Matter of fact, one of the first things I did when I first got elected into the Michigan Senate, didn't require a bill. It just said, you know, at Detroit Metro Airport, the only thing we got welcoming our vets is a banner that says, welcome the baggage claim. I said, we're gonna fix that, and we're gonna get a USO. So I actually co-founded the Michigan Freedom Center, and it was on November 11th, 2011, at 11:11 a.m. It was when we opened it, and now we've grown into 4 different centers, including the Troy MEPS, the Military Entrance Process Station, the Lansing MEPS, and now we got 2 centers out of Detroit Metro. And didn't require a bill, just required somebody to go off and say that's something we need to go off and do. You know, it's all about leadership, and it's all about being bold in your leadership. Now, I went off and I've had a whole career being bold. When I came back up to Michigan, my wife found her job back up here with one of the healthcare systems here in Michigan. She's a pediatrician. I found a job as an FAA certification engineer. That lasted about 1 week with this company I was with, and then because I looked at the operations that were going on, we were only delivering 17% of our ship sets on time. That's not a very good on-time delivery. Can you imagine that with Amazon? I don't think you'd last very long with Amazon shipping. Well, I put together a proposal, sent it to the general manager, and said, hey, you need to go off and do this. And he said, no, correction, you need to go off and do this. And he made me the head of program management department, and within a year, we were over 70%. And that led to a career in project management and management consulting, about 11 years. And I did that for 6 years on my own as a small business owner. And that was my first wake-up call, just like Mike was talking about with the single business tax. That was my first wake-up call that something was broken in Michigan, because I was doing my TurboTax tax return one day, and I had entered in all my revenue information. So then I started entering in all my business expense information, and the tax due was staying constant the whole time. I'm going, what's going on here? And it was because it was a gross receipts tax. And I'm saying, who the heck thought this thing up? And so that was my first wake-up call, if you would, into the political realm. But there's also a spiritual wake-up call that got me involved in getting into politics. And I don't know how many of you guys have heard of Via de Cristo. It's like Welcome Mass or Cursillo. It's a lay apostolic movement that says we're supposed to be the hands and feet of Christ. It's not supposed to be all on the pastor's shoulder. It's not supposed to be on the rabbi's shoulder. It's not supposed to be on the church leaders' shoulders all by themselves. We, as a broader community, are supposed to be engaged into being the hands and feet and actually making a difference out. And so it started waking me up that my life was more than just traveling in the airport and to my contracts and serving my clients. I had to do something more. So I actually got involved very early on in the Tea Party movement. I went to the first Tea Party event, and I don't know how many of you guys, you know who Congressman Thaddeus McCotter is?
Oh, yeah.
He was a classmate of mine in high school, and actually a line mate of mine in football. And like I often say that if I was at this weight back then, I would have been tackle and he would have been guard, but I was a guard, 155 pounds soaking wet, and he was a tackle at the time. And he was going to be speaking at a Tea Party rally. So my wife and I went to our first ever political event back in 2009 to watch my old classmate speak. And we sheepishly had this little sign made that said, the people are broke, the Constitution isn't. And we just bashfully kind of walked up from a parking lot to go to Plymouth Kellogg Park. And we were so, like, not politically savvy or anything, but we got there, there's over 1,500 people there, fed up with the fact that we're not paying attention to our Constitution, fed up with the fact that we're spending more than we're taking in, and we felt at home. And a lot of people will, cast disparagement against people that are in the Tea Party, but I'll tell you, I saw people from all walks of life there, and it's what we used to call being an American. And so that's part of my wake-up call. It's going off and realizing that we need to go off and right this ship. I was never active in politics before that, but man, I've been paying my penance ever since. And so, right to work is one of those things that anyway, my wife and I, at one of these events, we started getting very active and started getting active in the Tea Party. We went to a office hour that's being held by one of the guys that was going to be running for the seat that I currently serve in. And the guy lied to us. We'd done our research on the bills, and I said, I don't want anybody like that, you know, serving as my representative up in Lansing. So my wife and I went off and prayed about it, and I got a deadline. I said, I need to know by February 21st whether or not you want us to run for state senate. And my and that deadline, which is February 21st, 2010, my devotion was from 1 Corinthians 9:24, which reads, "For many run the race, but only one gets the prize. Run in such a way as to get the prize." And that's what we did. I mean, I shut down my business for 9 months. My wife and I we didn't have a war chest. I mean, we're not wealthy. I liquidated all of our retirement savings, which I don't know if you noticed, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. We were fully vested into making sure we did the right thing and that we conducted ourselves in an honorable fashion. The final analysis, we were the first person elected directly into the Michigan Senate in over 3 decades with 0 political experience, and we beat 4 former state representatives in the process. And it was, so when you see my record of service since getting elected, there's something different there, because I'm not in this for me. I'm not in this for any escalation. I'm in this to go off and adhere to the principles that I think we've forgotten about as a state and as a country. And so you'll hear a lot about principled service. You're going to hear a lot about it in this campaign. I've got a track record. I'm actually one of those rare guys that's actually running on my record here. I've got a track record of sticking close to principle. Matter of fact, when I first got elected, a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, said, "Okay, now you got elected, how are you going to keep from becoming part of the problem instead of part of the solution?" So we put together this little compass to keep me on track. And there's a series of 10 questions that we ask whenever we get into contentious legislation. And, you know, things like, is it constitutional? You know, it seems like a pretty basic question, right? And so even when we have difficult bills that are out there, stuff like the Lear Nassar bill, I mean, there's some difficult stuff there. We want to make sure nothing like that ever happens again. Well, it had provisions in it that some of this legislation that was blatantly unconstitutional, violated Article 1, Section 10, which is ex post facto prohibition. Well, we had ex post facto provisions in there, so even though I was like the original co-sponsor on it, when you actually read the bill, I said I got to take my name off this, and we're going to vote no unless we remove this provision. And that's exactly what I did. So it's important to stick up with those constitutional principles. That Constitution is a social compact between the people and the people that serve us. And like Mike was talking about, that's the difference between a constitutional republic and a banana republic. If you go off and elect somebody as your representative, they can do whatever the heck they want. They're not tied by the bonds of the Constitution. You know, you're disrespecting the sacrifice of all those who sacrificed to put that Constitution into place. And I don't take that lightly. So, a whole bunch of other things on here if you want to read it. But as we look forward in this upcoming election, I talk a lot about principles, and I talk a lot about principled solutions, and I know what I speak because I've been living it, and I've paid some penalties for doing that at times. Principled solutions, I'll just give you a broad base, and we'll drill into whatever ones you want, because I'm a policy wonk at heart as an engineer. I like to go off and fix things, so I could delve into pretty much any subject you want. You want to go into elections? Let's go into elections. But I talk a lot about principled solutions. Those principled solutions are, number one, we're going to eliminate the state personal income tax. I know everybody says, "Oh, it's impossible. You can't go off and do that." Yeah, they said about right to work. They said that about me getting elected in the Michigan Senate. I get it. It's impossible, but we're going to do it anyway. And by the way, when you do that, you eliminate the senior pension tax right along with it. The other thing we're going to go off and do is pursue broad-based economic development incentives. So instead of picking winners and losers like we've done, whether it's battery credits, whether or not it's film credits, whether or not it's data center credits, or big company credits because they promised 3,000 jobs instead of small company credits, whatever the case, we're not playing that game anymore. We're going to go off and have a level playing field, and we're going to fulfill Article 1, Section 1 of the Michigan Constitution, which means that our policies are meant for the equal benefit of all of our citizens. And so a lot of folks that have been left out of this economic boost are around our small businesses. I mean, we have policies that are good for big businesses or specific business sectors, but not broad-based for small businesses. I'm a former small business owner. Matter of fact, I'm a Microsoft Small Business Specialist certified, so I'm an IT geek too. And it's important that we do these broad-based. If you want economic growth, it happens onesie, twosie, three at a time out in the small business sector. That's where most of our businesses are, and you can see geometric growth from that sort of emphasis. So I'll be focusing on that. I've been a leader on healthcare free market healthcare solutions for quite some time. Matter of fact, I've been published in Forbes. If you go up to Forbes.com, some of the most popular articles they have on healthcare were authored by me on free market healthcare in the case for Medicaid block grants. So we cut all the strings from the federal government on that. I've been asked to speak nationally on free market healthcare topics, including the Heritage Foundation. And so when you talk education, I'm a big advocate for school choice, and I'm very passionate about getting rid of Common Core once and for all. Frankly, we got to get the feds out of education. We got the state out of education. Focus it back on parents, teachers, and students. I used to be on the Senate Education Policy before getting into the penalty box for having the audacity of going to our Life for Life banquet in my Senate Majority Leader's district. But back then, I saw a lot of things that turned things around in our state and turns things around in individual schools, and it all had to do with the local community getting involved and saying, not on my watch. There was never an ivory tower or a guy coming in on a white knight or a gal coming in on a white knight from DC or Lansing that says, here we are, we're going to fix everything for you. It never works that way. And Common Core is all about the top-down stuff. Also got some legislation around enhanced Michigan Education Savings Program that can put more money in the schools without increasing taxes and actually address things like our employee shortfalls, our workforce shortfalls. Well, there's so many things. As far as pro-life, I'm advocate of constitutional carry, and the endorsement. I mean, I can get in any public. I've got an issue of a solution on no-fault insurance, that we can decrease the cost of no-fault insurance while still protecting the needs for unlimited care for the folks that are suffering from traumatic brain injuries. I've actually cranked the numbers, and we're going through a cycle and a review process right now with some experts just to validate what I'm talking about. But just simplicity, simply put, if you go off and focus on healthcare, because about 70% of your premiums are healthcare, and at these free market healthcare solutions I'm talking about lower the overall cost of healthcare by about 20% or more, that alone decreases the cost of your auto insurance. So we got to get back into the free market there. So many other things we can go off and drill into, but I'll let you guys plug in on that. Along the way, I've been endorsed by Sean Hannity, and that was because of my free market healthcare solutions. I've had advocate, and I was on his radio show talking about that endorsement. I've been endorsed by Bob Lutz, our automotive legend here, because he knows I'm a very good problem solver, and he appreciates my engineering problem solving know-how. I don't take simply the true-false exams that we sometimes have in the legislature, and I actually prefer multiple choice and actually find the best solution, not simply a solution to the problems we're facing. I've got the endorsement of Senator Ted Cruz because I take principled stands and I'm not afraid to speak truth to power. Got the endorsement of Catherine Engelbrecht, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with who that is. From True the Vote. She was targeted by Lois Lerner because she had the audacity of trying to promote voter integrity. She was targeted by the IRS, the OSHA, ETF, FBI. They sent everything but the kitchen sink at her business to make her feel the pain for the audacity of trying to fix our voting process. And she knows that I was the one that actually came out and called for an investigation in the wake of our 2016 presidential election. I called for the AG and the Secretary of State to perform an investigation in the wake of that recount request by Jill Stein. And you're right, it was a blessing in disguise, because what we found were 31 counts of voter fraud. That's what was identified by the Secretary of State in their investigation. I asked the Attorney General to do an investigation. I have seen 0 prosecutions come out of there. And they also found a lot of the process that you were talking about, some of the process issues, and a lot of it dealt with training. A lot of it, people would sign up for the training at the beginning and then disappear and never see the rest of the training. So there's a lot of room for improvement in the voting process. And I actually worked with Catherine. We were going to do some forums on that topic here in Michigan. I was trying to work through the Senate. That didn't work, but we're going to do some independent forums where I actually went through and mapped out all of our election processes, just like I would do for a failure modes and effects analysis as an engineer on space station. I would find out where can this thing break, and I tried to identify all the different failure modes and then put in a way to actually mitigate the risk of those failure modes. And she appreciated that and endorsed me. I've been endorsed by David Barton, if you know who David Barton is, with Wall Builders. I've been endorsed by Jack Lausman, Skylab astronaut, and very principled man, a former U.S. Senate candidate here in the state of Michigan. Faith-based leaders all across the state have gotten behind us as well, because they know I will defend I have a track record for defending religious liberty and rights of conscience in our state. And so I take on a lot of the issues that nobody else wants to take on because this is not simply a job for me. This is a mission. And that's why when we talk about what I'm going to do as your next governor, it's going to be focused on not just providing solutions to the problem, but principled solutions based on these principles that we've forgotten about for too dang long. So we're on the ballot, just so you guys know. We're the only campaign in this gubernatorial race that got on the ballot with 100% grassroots mojo. So we've got almost 2,000 volunteers working on our behalf. About 500 helped us get up on the get to sufficient signatures to do that. That is a big haul. I don't know if you guys have ever gotten 15,000 signatures. Well, we got over 18,000. We're going to be filing some more as insurance runs here very shortly. That's a big deal. Everybody else had to pay for their signatures. They paid up to $6 per signature to go off and get in there. So if anybody's looking at an extra career, there's a lot of ballot initiatives going out there. And or you go off and send in a mailer saying, hey, do my homework for me and send it back to me. So those are different approaches to going off and getting it. We're doing it with grassroots, and you're going to need that grassroots army when it comes to the general election. I'm telling you, I was the only Republican gubernatorial candidate that had the guts to go into the belly of the beast in Detroit at the People's Forum, and I knew what we were getting into, but you know what? It's time to get them to bring in the pickets. And it's time to go off and testify and speak truth to power there as well. And I went up against Gretchen, Abdul Al-Sayed, and Bill Cobbs. And we held our head high. You can see the whole forum, all the questions, and what we're going to be expecting for this general election. They are revved up. They've got something called an energy team that they bust in from Lansing. About 100 people in a bus. They came in, and their job was to disrupt the event. So whenever I said that the sky was blue, they booed. Well, actually, here we are in a church, 1,800 people, Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church, and I had the audacity of mentioning the redemptive power of Jesus Christ and faith-based initiatives when it came to prison reform, and they booed me. And when it came to talking about all this single parent households and what could we do strategically to go off and mitigate that in the future or help them out, I said, well, okay, so we got to help the parents that are there and ease their burden. I get it. We want to make sure that we're making their lives a little bit easier, but ultimately we need to focus on the sanctity of marriage so that you've got two people taking care of the kids, and I got booed for that. That's what we're up against in this upcoming campaign. You need somebody that's going to be able to speak truth in those environments, because I'm telling you, we had people all around that place, and they were saying, I like what he has to say, I want to hear more of what he has to say, and this was not people with a normal R next to their name. That's the type of boldness we need. That's the type of boldness you'll get with me as your next governor. And I appreciate your time and want to open it up to any questions you have. Yes, sir.